Well, this is a continuation of the Darren Shan Vampire series reviews. In order to fully appreciate the oeuvre of Darren Shan, we had to also watch the Cirque du Freak, the Vampire's Assistant, or whatever way around it is.
When we were reviewing the books, it wasn't clear whether we liked them or not, until the end when we sort of cleared up that actually we're big fans.
Yeah.
So I feel like up front, I'm going to ask you, Rob, is this old gold?
The film
Yeah.
is not old gold, no.
What is it?
It's so many things and none of them are positive. It's a mess, and I hated it, and it wasn't even funny. Like, it wasn't fun to laugh at. Real contemptible cinema. And Darren Shan, the actor, it's a real testament that he's the only person who doesn't have a career anymore.
Cool. So, do you want to tell me what happened in the movie, Rob?
Okay, so the film starts with a cold open introducing the two main characters, Darren Shan, boring, and Steve Leonard, sociopath. The film fills you in on the characters, their backstories and motivations with a montage voiceover combo that seems to hold the audience in complete contempt for not already knowing what it's telling you. The two boys discover a poster at their school for the Cirque du Freak, which is a travelling freak show, and before you know it, you're there with barely a moment to catch your breath or question really why you started watching the film in the first place. At the Cirque, the boys meet Mr. Crepsley, who unspeakingly incites the boys to separately commit breaking and entering, attempted blackmail and larceny. Steve wishes to become a vampire, is turned down by Mr. Crepsley, who a few scenes later decides child servant will be Bance and turns Darren, the more boring of the two, into a vampire. And then what follows for the remainder of the film is a stream of exposition-heavy dialogue, world building that doesn't really service the plot in order to lazily set up a franchise that never materialised, and culminates in a final showdown facilitated by lazy storytelling, hand-wringing and sexism.
Fantastic. That is a very good and concise summary of the plot. I agree with every point. I will contest one point, is that they did not find a poster at the school. Mr. Tiny drives past in a funny car and flutters it out of the window very camply.
The guy that plays Mr. Tiny is a stage actor, and that translates very apparently onto the screen. He's so
I'm going to be honest, Mr. Tiny's my favourite part of this movie.
I think I agree. I think he's fun. He's the only bit of the film that I had fun with.
He's just chewing the scenery, throwing his weight about, like...
And the fat suit is great as well.
Yeah.
How it just barely connects to his chin is perfect. Full Alan Rickman in Robin Hood. Just like, I know what kind of film I'm in and I'm going to have fun.
I want to talk about the opening of the start of the movie.
Okay.
Because I don't know, but it feels like it has a Spider-Man 1 opening. It's really naughties for a movie like this to have a really long intro sequence. With like animation, because it just went on forever. I remember watching it and I was like, this is really long, and I thought that probably about a quarter of the way through it.
Funny enough, the intro credit animation thing was one of the only things I really enjoyed about it.
I think I would have liked it in isolation. What I wanted at that point though was to watch a Darren Shan movie, and what I was doing was watching a weird animation about a movie I was about to watch.
Well, the cold open sets up, like I was saying, like it kind of feels like it holds you in contempt for not already knowing it. Feels like you do already know it, so it's like pissed off at itself for having to tell you. And then once that happens, then you get the cold open, which then sets up the tone of the franchise with like the boys being puppets and Mr. Tiny's controlling everything.
Which I think is an interesting change from the books.
Yeah,
because
it's right up front with Mr. Tiny's involvement.
In the books, we still have no idea about Mr. Tiny's involvement, really. Like, it's implied. His name's Des Tiny, and everyone seems to be a big fan of that fact. But, like, overall, we haven't seen him do anything. In this movie, he's just, like, the plot of the movie is Mr. Tiny read the plot of the movie in a book and is now enacting that at the people in the movie.
What do you think about the change of having Murloc?
Murloc? You talking about Murloc?
For some reason decided to change his name, although in the credits he's Murloc.
Murloc.
Like, no one's quite sure what he's called.
No. And also the guy that plays him doesn't know where he's from. Like, the accents he's doing vary wildly, and I have no idea if it was like an intentional creative decision to do a medley of accents to be like Merlot as a man from nowhere, or if the actor was just having a real hard time doing a northern accent, which is what he was going for. And that was just his accent coming through.
The actor is from Ireland.
He's from Ireland. Fucking hell. my first note of the whole film was intro scene - tonal chaos.
So it opens on the cold open of the funeral. Darren Shan's funeral.
Yeah. What the fuck? And he's like on his phone in the coffin, which is a nice bringing it forward to 2009 moment. Because in the books, he's just like, has to philosophize about life and death and think about his parents. But in the coffin in 2009, in the film, he can just fucking play Candy Crush and just not even have to worry about it. So it's a moment of personal growth that Darren is has completely taken away from him in the film. Before we move on, the editing of the film is choppy and impatient. And so I looked at who the editor of the film was, and it's a woman named Leslie Jones, whose other credits include Thin Red Line, and she's worked with Paul Thomas Anderson on The Master and Inherent Vice, both of which, and Punch Drunk Love, all of which are very nicely edited, calm films that allow the film to breathe. So what the fuck was she on when she edited this film?
Well, there's too much content. The movie's 2 hours long.
Yeah, and oh god. I was bored and didn't feel like I had any time to catch my breath the whole time. Like the film just has so many oxymorons to it. Like
it's like a slideshow. The movie's like a slideshow.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
I also have a note that just says the editing of this movie is horrible. So I'm glad you covered that. I'll cross that out now.
The film needs to be completely deconstructed and refilmed. Like you can't save this in the edit. I don't think. So even though I like shit on that editor, I do kind of agree there's so much content that you can't even rescue it. I'm just looking at the director's other credits as well. He directed... Oh no, he didn't. He wrote Ants. He directed About a Boy. Fucking hell. That's a good film. Dreadful. This is a film where people's careers came to die for a moment.
This is a movie where everyone came to cash in a fucking paycheck,
They
man.
did,
It doesn't seem like it had any impact on people because it didn't make any money. No one knows about this fucking movie.
Fucking John C. Reilly. Let's go through the cast. John C. Reilly, a relatively big comedic actor and serious actor. Ken Watanabe.
Huge. How are you getting Ken Watanabe in your movie?
I mean,
to do a weird speaking role.
Yeah. And it's the only time that Ken Watanabe has been able to use his real head for a role. Normally they have to prosthesis that out. And then getting fucking Willem Dafoe and Salma Hayek.
Sometimes there are people you look at and go, wait, where do I know that person from? Orlando Jones, Jane Krakowski, Frankie Faison.
I told Paul, I'm there for you anytime, anywhere. Never make that statement to a director again.
Darren and Steve find the Cirque du Freak note. And the way that they interact with it feels like improv. Like, it's so badly acted. It's clearly the first take. And I don't know why they've bothered to put it in the movie. It's so bad. I'll put it up now.
Whoa. Cirque du Freak, one night only, the world's greatest freak show. 500 years? What the heck?
That looks awesome.
They don't have any tertiary friends in this movie. It's just Darren's... At the start, Darren's like, I've got a lot of friends at school. Not these fucking freaks, though. And he points out some nerds.
Yeah. What was that about?
I think it was supposed to be funny.
Right. It wasn't.
It was just mean.
It was mean, yeah. So the Cirque. We get to the Cirque, and you're introduced to the little people as well. Off the bat. They're ticket.
Just there. One of them bites Steve. They buy tickets. They go in.
A good indication for this film's directing is there's a line just before they go into the Cirque du Freak. Darren says, "By the way, I'm obsessed with spiders."
But I've got a very specific note about this, which is he says,
I should explain. Steve was obsessed with vampires, and I, on the other hand, was obsessed with spiders. I don't know why. It was just like it was in our blood or something.
So the Cirque, you have this quirky performance by Ken Watanabe, who is a strange choice for Mr. Tall.
Yeah, because Mr. Tall never gets into scrap. Ken Watanabe makes sense as one of your people that's going to be fighting someone, right?
He can handle himself. It's not who... I kind of picture Mr. Tall as being black as well, so when he was a Japanese guy, I was like, this is really giving me a lot of dissonance about this character. His name's Hibernius Tall. I mean, that's like a 60s jazz name, isn't it?
So he comes out and does a speech, and then he's like, the Wolfman, and they bring out this is one of the parts of the movie I really liked, a fantastic Wolfman costume. Like,
I appreciate that it wasn't CGI.
Really shitty. Like, the mouth doesn't move. It's clearly a man in a suit. I loved it.
One of the transition phases of American Werewolf in London, where he's like a mutilated human wolf hybrid, but they settled on that.
I wanted the Wolfman to have was a pot belly, because I hadn't quite seen that before.
The whole circus scene lasts about 34 seconds, so...
Yeah, God, again, you don't have any time to rest. Like, you get into the Cirque and you're like, cool, this is an establishing part of the book series. Like, you're introduced to a bunch of characters that are relevant later on, but no, it's just like, bang this shit out. We want to world build without doing the legwork, basically.
So I don't like calling them the movie and the book shows make me call them freaks.
I think I was interested in the freak part because I grew up as a kid around a lot of European refugees, a lot of older European refugees.
I don't like calling them freaks. The members of the circus all team up to end up working together for their acts, which doesn't happen in the books. In the books, they're all given a backstory, and we get to know them a little bit before their show. It respects their act and them as a people. In the show, the Wolfman comes out, bites off someone's hand again, like in the books, but this time it's Cormac Limbs, who we forgot to mention in the book reviews.
Yeah, played by Jane Krakowski in this, she's someone who can make me laugh just by being on screen, so it's just nice to have her there.
Also, they've gender flipped the role.
Yeah.
And not done anything with that, really. They just went, this book's got a lot of men in it, hasn't it?
Oh, fair enough on that one. I mean,
yeah, I agree.
The film.
This movie does not
heavy.
do great things with women, though, so let's get to that later.
No, it does not. This film basically made the civil rights movement for women in the 60s like a net loss. Yeah, so Gertrude's played by Christian Schall, who's in
another all-star cast member
and a prolific voice actor. Very good comedian, and Ramus Tubel is played by Frankie Faison, I think his name is, he's in Silence of the Lambs. He's the orderly in Silence of the Lambs, and I think he's done some.
He seemed like a stage actor, but I think he was just playing a stage actor. So yeah, she bites stuff up and feeds them to him, and then he eats a bunch of fire, and pull all the stuff that she's bitten up, all the metal that she's bitten up that she feeds to him. He's turned into a little tricycle, and he pulls that out of his stomach, and then Alexander Ribs rides it about a bit.
Yeah, and then you have like a weird comedic flat moment where Steve is like, nice bike.
I've never hated Steve more. It's a really good characterization piece for Steve.
That's a moment where the director thought, he was like, yeah, that's good, that's staying in. A note about Cormac Limbs as well. So Truska, played by Salma Hayek, is the penultimate act before Mr. Crepsley come out. Because in the real world, Salma Hayek's more famous than Jane Krakowski. But in reality, regrowing an entire limb is way more impressive than a woman who can grow a beard fast.
Yeah, I agree.
If you're gonna tier your show about what the most engrossing elements of it are, I want to see the woman who can grow a fucking hand back just before the end, not Salma Hayek and her fast beard.
It's sort of. There's also a bit of a problem where Truska's slightly over-sexualized in the movie, and she's doing like this weird lap dance to grow her beards. So maybe that's why Mr. Toole chose that ordering for the show. Is he was like, oh yeah, well we'll get the lap dancer out just before Mr. Crepsley.
Maybe for the dads.
Selma Hayek is really getting one in for the dads this movie.
I feel like the director had maybe seen From Dusk Till Dawn and was like, oh, that's how you direct Salma Hayek.
We've skipped over Evra as well. I want to talk about Evra performance quickly, because he comes out with this snake and he's like, I'm a cool snake boy, this is my snake. Anyway, what I actually want to do is play you a song because I'm really into music, and it gives Evra the slightest bit of humanity.
Yeah, it was a nice touch.
That he wants to make his music. He doesn't really care about the Cirque du Freak, he just wants to be a musician.
Yeah.
He's kind of bored of doing the snake boy thing. I liked it.
Yeah, I agree. I like Evra in general.
I liked Evra in this movie, and I'm not afraid to say that. I'm not afraid to stand up.
Yeah.
For the parts of this movie I believe in.
There are dozens of us who like Evra in this movie. Yeah, he's the best character in the film. He's played solidly, has some heart. His character is subverted in nice ways from the books. Evra is the only character that I can get on board with. But if the film was about him, I'd fucking care more.
And then they have Mr. Crepsley, And he's like, cool, guys, this is me and my spider. He's like, oh no, I've lost the spider. And then they do a little dance, and ha ha ha, it's very funny. And Steve says,
his name's not Lawton Crepsley. It's for a horse and he's a vampire. I saw his painting in my vampire books.
Vampire books?
Mr. Crepsley is like, yeah, I'm a vampire. That's cool. You guys should not mention that, though, because otherwise I'll eat you, or whatever. Yeah. And then his act is over, and it's really odd.
Yeah, in front of everyone.
In front of everyone. Like, everyone's just sat there. They're in an auditorium, but they've brought a bunch of chairs to the front.
Yeah, where, like, the orchestra would be.
Yeah, it's like they couldn't afford enough extras to fill out the whole...
No one wanted to be in this bullshit. Not even
no one wanted to be in the movie. The teacher from school, who has, like, a catchphrase and is, like, set up to be a character in the movie, he storms in with a bunch of police officers, and he's like, that's it, this is over, you're exploiting these people, Mr. Tall. And Alexander Ribs is like, we're not exploited, look at my weird stomach, and he takes off his shirt, and the teacher just screams, freak! Freak! Yeah. And the scene ends.
Cut to Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi saying, that's why I'm here. Like, what did you expect, bro, when you came to the fucking freak show? That it would just be, like, administrative workers that you would have to mingle with, and you'd feel like you didn't have to meet the talent.
So Lawton Crepsley and Gavin Paul go backstage, and they're having a chat. Darren snuck into the room to steal the spider. So he overhears this chat they're having, and they're given a bunch of exposition. In this version of the Darren Shan saga, the vampire generals don't really exist anymore. The vampires and the Vampanese are on the verge of a war.
Yeah.
During this exposition rant, Steve bursts in, says, can I be a vampire? Mr. Crepsley tastes his blood, says no, sends him away. Darren sees the whole thing because he's in the cupboard. The slatted, like, Lowry door cupboard, like we saw Mr. Crepsley in when he was hiding in Debbie's room.
Yeah.
Like, hiding in cupboards in both franchises. And then that's about it for that scene. Do you have anything else to say about that scene? Because it's kind of long and boring.
No, it went in and went straight out again, that scene for me, even though it should be like the inciting moment of the film. Like with Darren stealing Madame Octa and being in the cupboard, like those are very important, prominent moments. But the film doesn't know what it wants to spend its time exploring, so nothing works.
Yeah, because immediately after this, he runs away from Lawton Crepsley. So now he has a conflict with Lawton Crepsley, but as he's running away from Lawton Crepsley, Mr. Tiny gives him a lift home with a Vampanese in the car.
Yeah, and he's got fucking mad pedo energy in that scene. Yeah.
Which I love. I loved every scene with Mr. Tiny in this movie. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And he's like, Darren, you had to run away from that vampire. Oh. And now there's like this new weird conflict.
Yeah. They've shoehorned more premonition and destiny into the first bit of the film.
And Murloc.
Murloc.
Shoehorn Murloc in, who's not as purple as I thought Vampanese would be.
No, they
very normal colour human.
Doesn't even have purple eyes, but Steve does later on when he becomes a half Vampanese. Oh, it's a mess.
Well, and he gets his Super Saiyan hair.
It's a fucking mess. Also, the shoehorning in early doors of the premonition and the destiny doesn't work in the film because the film character of Darren ever being or feeling important or relevant is laughable because he's so boring and vacuous. So all of these like important figures surrounding him and weighing him up and being like, oh, so you're the boy that's going to lead the vampires to victory, or knowing that he's particularly relevant, just feels completely off because he's such a tedious person to be around.
Taking audience surrogate to like a whole new level where it's like he just doesn't have a personality.
He barely has any lines. Oh, and the lines he
barely has lines.
The lines he does have are delivered terribly and don't drive the plot forward. He's so fucking boring.
Vampire books?
In the world of the books, the world is fine. There is a Cirque du Freak that operates that happens to have a vampire in it, and there's also a vampire underworld that is separate from the Cirque du Freak that operate, and they have their own politics. The overarching scope of the world is fine. There's nothing that bad's going to happen at any point soon. But there's these overlapping small communities, and there's also these other worldly figures of Mr. Tall and Mr. Tiny who exist to be these otherworldly characters that are trying to influence the world.
Yeah, but like neutral characters too.
Yeah, they're neutral, and they have their own goals. They're not very clear, and they're kind of interesting. in the movie, the world is just immediately on the verge of apocalypse.
Yeah.
And like everyone's about to go to war. If there's a vampire war, the world is going to end. And also, for some reason, later on, the Cirque du Freak has to have a side.
It feels like in the books, if a vampire-vampanese war were to break out, it would be like guerrilla warfare, subterfuge, and done without human beings ever really noticing, or maybe finding some scrap of evidence here or there. But yeah, it feels like it's going to be trench warfare between them, and everyone else that's in the way is just going to die. They're just collateral.
I'm going to breeze through these because these are really boring parts of the movie. Darren takes Madame Octa home, ends up taking her to school. Steve finds it and is like, cool. Accidentally drops the cage. It gets out. It tries to escape. It bites Steve.
Yeah.
It has a very, again, I'm coming back to Spider-Man 1, where if you remember when Peter Parker first uses spider sense and it zooms around the corridor.
Now you said
it does that same thing but with a spider.
Now you said that again, I really can see the Spider-Man 1 vibe, at least in the school scenes. Maybe there's a Willem Dafoe crossover here as well. Campy, hammy, but Spider-Man 1 knows what it's doing with that vibe.
Yeah.
This is accidentally campy and hammy, and suffers for it. It feels like a Disney Channel kids sitcom movie. Did you ever watch those when you were a kid?
Great shout. It feels like a Zoe 101 movie or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, Steve gets bitten by the spider. They do a weird bit where the spider's all CGI, and it actually looks pretty good. Like I quite like the look of Madame Octa. It's a little bit dated, but it's like she got a lot of personality and character.
Yeah, it was kind of fun.
But then when it jumps onto Steve, he just has like someone's put their hand under his shirt. And it's like stopped moving. It's just like this big bulging out thing. So he gets bitten right on the face, which is pretty brutal. And Madame Octa dips.
Yeah.
Darren goes to Mr. Crepsey and he's like, "Can I have the antidote?" And Mr. Crepsey's like, "Only if I turn you into a vampire." In the movie, he later makes it clear that he's doing this because he knows Mr. Tiny wants Darren.
Right.
So this way, he's taking Darren for himself and fucking Mr. Tiny. But also, if you want Darren to be on your side, Mr. Crepsey, you need to stop treating him like a complete piece of shit all the time. Also,
weird moves to just antagonise a master of time and destiny.
Well, I think Mr. Crepsey's trying to stop the Vampanese War, right?
Right. It's like I watched this whole film and plot elements that I already knew existed from the book, like, has basically failed to go in, or any changes from that have failed to go in. Like, I feel like this film, I felt like I was holding onto the bumper of the narrative while the car it was attached to sped down a busy street and smashed into chicken crates and planes of glass and stuff. Like, it was just impossible to sit and ever get to grips with the film.
I feel like that as well, but what really helped is they have a character called Truska in the movie, who is the bearded lady, but also she's like a weird Romanian sage, and sometimes she just tells you what the plot is.
Yeah, so there's a lot of exposition dumps in this film. I have complete contempt for that kind of storytelling. It's lazy and I hate it. So to get Salma Hayek in to just deliver exposition was a slap in the face. There's a lot of swearing in it as well. It's supposed to be like a kids' film, and there's bitches and shits all over the place.
Well, you can have as many bitches and shits as you want in a PG-13. You just can only have one fuck.
Right.
Obviously, it's a movie about vampires and circus performers, so it's probably going to be difficult to get it to be a PG.
Yeah. Where would you have the one fuck if you were going to put that into the script?
Just right at the start. I don't even know why they don't just lead with it. Just first word of the movie.
Like Korn.
Y'all want a single say fuck that.
We'll find the song and we'll put that in.
Just play the whole thing. It's better than the movie. Whatever it is, it's more enjoyable than watching this movie. Mr. Crepsey just decides that he's going to turn Darren into a vampire to fuck Mr. Tiny, or because he wants a slave. Like, it's unclear, but he does it. They do it there and then. He's just like bang it out, gives him the antidote. Sorry, they go to Steve's hospital room and they administer the antidote.
Yes, Darren delivers a line here like, "Why can't we just take the elevator?" or something like that.
Why don't we just take the elevator?
When they climb outside. Yeah,
they're climbing up the side of the building.
After they flit to the hospital.
The nurse comes in and she's like, "You can't be here." It's like, obviously, it's like midnight. Or it's like, obviously you couldn't take the elevator. So that line again is just... The director was like, "Isn't this a bizarre situation? We're going to have the audience analog make a joke about it to get everyone on board." And be like, "Couldn't we just take the elevator?" Well, no, you couldn't. That's a fucking ridiculous thing to say, Darren, you idiot. That's why we're doing this. The flitting looks cool. I would contend.
The effects in this movie look good. The movie doesn't look bad in general.
After the scene of Mr. Krebsley giving Steve the antidote, we also maintain the scene of Darren seeing Annie and initially trying to attack her and try and kill her for her blood. The film never sets up that Darren is starting to go through hunger pangs and it's like fucking with his body that he's a vampire. It's like, oh, you're going to suffer.
Yeah, and then he doesn't drink blood, and then for the rest of the movie there's no point where he does that again, and I find it very frustrating.
Yeah, it never...
You set up that if you don't drink blood, you're going to want to eat your sister, and you're going to have a weird... The camera angle's going to change, and they're going to play some weird music.
Yeah.
So you need to drink blood, and then he's like, for a week or so, he's like, nah.
A bit sweaty and pale, but other than that, seems to be contending with it quite well. Another frustrating reason they don't set that up is that later on, when he uses a woman for plot development in order to drink her blood, he then is like, oh, I'm like super strong now.
Which is not how vampires work.
It's lazy storytelling. Again, it doesn't know what it wants to spend time exploring. So you have the scene where Darren's apologising to his parents for being a shithead and generally being like, I love you, and making amends because he knows what's about to happen. And then you have Mr. Krebsley killing Darren, which is a great scene.
Snaps his neck. It's a very good scene.
I happily watched John C. Reilly kill that actor's character over and over again, and then throw him off the roof. Cut to the wake.
Yep.
And then Steve causes a massive fucking scene, screaming at Darren's corpse in front of his parents.
Yeah, because he sees the marks on his fingers, and he's like, I know that's how they make vampires, which isn't clear why he knows that.
Yeah, no, because it said in a voiceover at the beginning of the film very briefly that Steve liked vampires, so...
Vampire books?
That's why he knows everything.
And as we all know, vampires have 10 marks on their fingers that indicate...
Very common knowledge.
Yeah, very common knowledge outside of the Darren Shan universe.
Then we cut to Darren's funeral, and then subsequently Mr. Krebsley digging up Darren, which is a nice shot. Mr. Krebsley digging up Darren's nice because you can see it's like a cross-section of the earth with Darren in the coffin underneath on his phone, being illuminated by the light of his phone. Mr. Krebsley on top of the earth digging, and then there's like the moon behind them.
Yeah, it looks nice.
It's a nice shot. It's a good shot. So then you have the fight with Merlot and Mr. Krebsley in the cemetery.
Mr. Krebsley tricks him into getting hit by a car.
So they have there's like a flitting fight scene here where they're like bouncing off of tombstones like a pinball joke.
Yeah, they're just causing a fucking scene. A lot of collateral damage is caused.
Mr. Krebsley tricks Merlot into the highway where there's a good 5 or 6 seconds where the truck driver that's about to hit them sees them, flashes his lights, honks the horn, doesn't divert, maintains his current speed. Then Merlot appears, and then Krebsley and Darren trick him into being hit. But it's like that scene from Austin Powers where the guy's driving the steamroller from fucking ages away.
Yeah.
That's how it made me feel. It's just like, you had so much time. Everyone had so much time for this not to happen, and then it happened. And then he kills the truck driver, so you establish that Merlot's a maniac, which you already know, but you see it, I guess, for the first time.
Mr. Krebsley takes Darren to the Cirque.
Yeah.
So he goes there, and they're all like doing poses and like doing weird things. Everything's lit by fire, even though it seems like they're a stationary place. It doesn't seem like they can move this circus anywhere very easily. So everyone's like doing weird Tim Burton shit, and Darren's like, "Whoa, what's going on here? Why are they acting like that?"
Because it's supposed to be fun, I guess.
Yeah, because later on at breakfast, everyone's just sitting about having breakfast. But no one's like doing weird poses.
My main takeaway from the initial arrival at the Cirque is that Harkat, I think they call him, the little person, goes like full Bilbo in Lothlorien. He does that hissing.
Yeah.
Just as soon as I saw it, I was like, "Oh, that's fucking Bilbo." And then Salma Hayek goes full Galadriel later on, where she gives a premonition like 5 seconds later. Like,
I've got my note here, but we didn't bring it up earlier. I've written Truska knows the plot, and it adds nothing.
Yeah. But someone watched Lord of the Rings like the day they filmed that, and they were like, "Oh, put that in." People like that, don't they?
Lauren Krebsley and Mr. Toole are having a conversation, and Mr. Krebsley's like, we're outside. Darren instead decides to listen into like a weird corner, and tricks another female member of the circus to come and listen with him. But she's currently trying to do the laundry.
Yeah,
because she's a woman.
She's a future woman in refrigerator for this film.
She's the laundry person for the circus.
Yeah.
She does ironing and laundry.
Yeah.
And that's all we ever see her do for the whole movie.
Patrick Fugit that actually is trying during that montage scene, which is nice.
Yeah, I've written here, I like that Everett has more personality than in the books.
They got a genuine laugh out of me with the Dumpster Baby song as well.
I wanna be your dumpster baby.
But then during this montage scene, Darren gets flitting powers, which undermines the fact that you're trying to build up a franchise, because where's his development go from here? Because in the books, It's like you're a half vampire. It's going to take you ages to get flitting powers. You'll be able to go out in the day still, but there's trade-offs to being a half vampire. But all of a sudden, he just gets flitting powers. So you're like, well,
and hand daggers.
You're like, oh, well, great. So he's got no development left in being a vampire. I assume you'll want to do 3 more films. So where does he go from here? You've left yourself no room. When does Steve get turned into a Vampanese? When does that happen?
Mr. Tiny just is like, don't want to become a Vampanese. He's like, yeah, alright. Yeah. I've got a note here. Why are the Vampanese all dirty? They're all fucking filthy.
They are dirty.
They're like from Mad Max or some shit.
You can't wear a nice white suit and black turtleneck if you're going to roll around in filth all the time, can you?
It really takes a lot of credit away from them being people. Like in the books, they're people. And in the movie, it's like, look at these disgusting, dirty monsters.
Yeah. It really dehumanises them.
Devampires
Devampanizes them. So then the Vampanese turn up at the Cirque to... What's their motivation here?
Just cause some chaos.
Neither I nor the actors know what their motivation was in this scene.
They want Mr. Tiny wants Darren for something.
Right, so they go to steal Darren, right? And then the Vampanese break into his room, and Everett and Monkey Girl watch Darren fight 3 full-grown men / Vampanese and don't help him.
They've got dagger hands, mate.
This is where you live. These are your people. This is your home. It doesn't matter if you're going to win or lose the fight. You fight because you're defending something. But
I mean, one of them is a snake boy, so he's cold-blooded. So that's a moniker for cowardice.
And the other one's
a woman, and the movie makes very clear that women do the laundry and don't have any other involvement in the plot.
This is when the film really starts to show its hand in its sexism. Because it now establishes Monkey Girl, whose name I don't know. What's her name?
Rebecca, I think.
Rebecca? Sure, I'll take your word for it. This is when the film establishes Rebecca as a character and puts her in a position where they then kidnap her purely for plot development. The Vampanese don't know that Darren and Rebecca are an item or even have feelings for each other. Mm-hmm. They don't know that she's relevant to Darren at all. But the film steals her so that Darren has motivation to go to the final confrontation. I started to dislike the film at this point.
At this point? We're like an hour and a half in at this point. I'm impressed that you got this far.
Up until now, the film was lazy and a mess, and I disliked it a little bit because it was failing to adapt something that I liked, at least as a child, and have heavy nostalgia for. But at this point, I started to have contempt for the film by being prejudiced and by writing lazy women characters.
Which the books also do.
Yeah. But I don't know why I feel like the books get away with it more. Maybe because I read them when I was a kid and I didn't have the insight I have into character.
Also, the female characters do more in the books, right? They're not...
Yeah.
And they're never used as... they're never used the way they are here. There's never a woman dangling on a stage, dangling through a rope.
Yeah, literally dangling.
Darren Shan has to rescue, right? It's never that overt.
Well, they're all like either there to provide premonition and exposition, or there to be murdered, raped, killed, like whatever, so that the main character has something to do. The film obviously fails the Bechdel test, which we spoke about the other day, which is a test where does a film have 2 female characters, they don't necessarily have to be named, who have a conversation at some point about something that isn't a man. And for this film, no.
During all of this time, Darren's been training as well, and Mr. Krebsley's been showing him how to use hand daggers, which you're already a group of people that operate in the shadows. Why don't you just carry weapons?
Yeah.
To have a big sword.
Yeah.
A punch is not better if you straighten your fingers and it's a dagger. It's actually very awkward to make meaningful actions. Like, it's easier to punch someone than it is to like do a weird slash with your fingers, right? Just have a sword.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so what Murlock's done is him, Steve, and Miss Tiny have taken Darren's parents, Darren's sister, and the laundry lady from the Cirque du Freak, and strung them up on a stage at where they last performed, where the circus last performed, and is dangling them down and just taunting Darren with them. Mr. Crepsley shows up. He recklessly throws Madame Octa as a weapon, and she does nothing.
Yeah,
he just sort of launches her.
His livelihood
into the crowd.
And sort of pseudo friend, companion. He's happy to just sort of launch Vampanese.
Yeah, and she doesn't do anything. Then you have like two breakaway fights, one between Darren and Steve, and one between Merlot and Crepsley. Yeah, and like Crepsley's like doing this weird like climbing up the curtains thing, and there's a bunch of really dodgy wire work in their fight.
The whole time I couldn't move away from thinking about the parents. Like, imagine your son's dead, then you sort of come to dangling over a stage in an auditorium where you see your gormless child for the first time in however long, like a year. He's dirty and dishevelled. He's
wearing his leather jacket.
He's wearing his leather jacket. He's being monologued to by the psychopath that kidnapped you. There's a woman with a tail there, and John C. Reilly sort of milling around in the background. And how do you process your emotions of, like, my son's alive, also he's in a fight to the death? It was such a distraction for me, the parents being there the whole time. It was just like, this is weird, I can't get out of their mindset. Because they can't communicate with each other either, so you could, like, I just imagine the mum and dad looking at each other like, this is a bit weird, isn't it?
Just wild-eyed.
Yeah, fucking hell.
Whoa, this is sick.
Bizarre choices.
Yeah, the fights are resolved. Is there anything you want to say about the fights?
Not really. At this point, Darren really doubles down on delivering his bizarre lines with no emotion whatsoever. He's incapable. Darren, the character, is incapable of like poetry or metaphor. He's like very literal, but in a non-funny way. So like you can make that funny, like in Guardians of the Galaxy with Drax, but in this, it's not meant to be. It's not a deliberate decision. And the
he's not an alien.
No.
You just couldn't write lines for it. He kind of just repeats like the last word of what people say.
Exactly that, yeah. He just reminds people what the last person's line was and says it in a more boring way. I have nothing to say about the fight scenes. They were fine.
Yeah, the fight reminded me of what we do in the shadows. I'll put them up here with where they float, and I'll compare them to the weird floaty wire work.
The fight scenes were that kind of choppy, close camera work that reminded me of Transformers. So you can like do lots of fast editing and make it seem like there's fast, kinetic, frenetic action happening, but really you just had John C. Reilly and whoever played Murloc sort of slapping each other close to a camera.
I just didn't care. That's my problem.
No, don't care. I've got 1 hour, 29 minutes, 44 seconds, sexual tension. That's what I've got next to that timestamp. So
I bet that is Steve and Darren being really close.
I think it is.
When they're like arguing. Yeah. That's 100% what that is. Debbie unhooks herself with her monkey tail.
We got a good bit of setup and payoff for once.
And then she's like, Darren, I want you to drink my blood.
Yep.
Please, so that you can generate your true power and defeat Steve, because that's probably how this works.
The real nail in the coffin for the female characters of this film. Just having her offer herself up as food, so Darren can fight more effectively. It's the worst element of the film.
Yeah, like if she used her monkey tail and like pulled on like a chandelier cord and the chandelier dropped on the guy.
She had a bit of agency.
That would have been great. That's a much better.
Yeah. She showed like intuition or a bit of agency or anything, but no, it's just like, I acknowledge that my place here is to just be fuel for Darren to fight more effectively.
So the fight resolves, and then they do probably the worst crime of the movie, which is they Deus Ex Machina his parents. They just go, I've convinced them with my magical vampire powers that this never happened.
Yeah. We got Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith in with a little doohickey, wiped their minds and sent them back to their house.
Like, honestly, until that, I was like, this movie wasn't like the worst thing I've ever seen. As soon as that happened, I was like, what a waste of time.
Why did the
Every
parents have to be
single
there?
fucking element of this. Yeah, why are the parents there? Every element of this movie is such a fucking waste of time.
Yeah. Why did the parents need to be there if you're going to steal Rebecca and use her for the main character's plot development?
Well, because they needed someone with a monkey tail that could free themselves.
So that's fine. So you just have Rebecca. The parents being there is completely unnecessary.
The problem is they haven't made it clear that Darren and Rebecca have a relationship to the Japanese.
So it's not enough weight for the final confrontation.
Yeah, they couldn't have had someone like view them kiss or something.
Yeah, like
like listening while Everett's like, "Oh, I really want to jump her bones, mate," and Everett's like, "Dude, you need to stop talking like this about my friends."
One of the little people, which they establish works for Mr. Tiny, could have spotted them kissing or spotted them getting close and reported that back to Mr. Tiny. But no, they don't do that.
Because we also don't get their parents' reaction. Like, maybe you could have played that for laughs, and that's why they're there.
Oh, maybe,
like,
yeah.
The woman faints, probably. Does a woman faint? Someone faint in this movie?
Probably.
Does a woman faint at some point in this movie?
Probably.
I feel like they do. No women fight in this whole movie. You have a woman that can regenerate her limbs and she doesn't fight. Yeah. And there's a battle for their home taking place.
And they didn't know what to do with the parents after they'd used them for plot development. So they just, like you say, Deus Ex Machina them off the stage.
That's the movie, Rob. Is there anything else that happens? Anything more you want to say about it?
No, it's a fucking mess. I didn't enjoy it up to the point where I started to hate it. It doesn't adapt something that I enjoy well at all, which is always a crime. And I'm glad that the studio lost money on it and they didn't continue on with the franchise. Although the prospect of watching more of it does entice me.
Where would you go with the rest of the franchise? Yeah, it's rough.
The film is 2 hours long and you don't set anything up effectively.
So you just sort of mill about the circus for another fucking 8 hours of movies, I guess?
Yeah,
6 hours of movies?
I was done with the Cirque by the end of it.
We need to close this off, Rob. We need some sort of outro.
We do.
I don't know what you want to do as an outro.
Ultimately, this film is an exercise in studio meddling. The film feels like a camel. And the expression, a camel is a horse made by a committee. This film feels like it was made by a committee. It's a mess. It's rushed, yet boring and slow. And I would happily never watch it again.
Should I just hard cut on you saying that?
Yeah, I think so.
I think all actors reach that point in their career where they want to play someone who eats another body part, you know. There wasn't really a carnivore movie, as it were, around, and I felt like this might be my only opportunity.
Hi, I'm Jane Krakowski, and I'm a freak. Is that what we all have to say?
What does a finger taste like? Chocolate, oddly enough. My fingers in particular taste like chocolate. I have an interesting mix of sort of a dark chocolate and an alpine on the other side. Kwama's fingers, oddly enough, taste a lot like chocolate as well. And she had some red fingernail polish that had a real kind of Washington apple flavor going on to it. So fingers are pretty delicious.
It actually was chocolate.